Welcome to day 4 in the Teacher's Aid training. I'm Sarah and I'm so excited to share what we are learning about today. If you missed yesterday's training, make sure you go back and watch because I showed you some incredible hacks for planning an entire year of lesson plans in under 2 hours. Today, I'm going to show why these profiles are the best thing I've ever made for my class and why you should be making them too. Then I'm going to share the #1 question you should ask your scholars' families at the beginning of the school year. Finally, I am going to show you how this one AI trick made goal setting 10 times more meaningful. So, what are student learning profiles anyways? These are helpful for learning how students perceive themselves as learners and also how they like to learn. Not only that, but you can get insight on what motivates them so that when they need that extra push, you know exactly what'll work. These profiles are also helpful for crafting progress reports and report card comments, as you'll pull students' strengths and weaknesses from their own words. You can also use these student learning profiles to group students together based on interests. You can find rewards that are more motivating for them, and you can even use them to learn how to make a math lesson more relevant to their world. These were by far the best things that I ever made for my class because it not only saved my butt in the middle of the year, but it also saved me a ton of time doing grades, having meaningful conferences, and when creating interventions for my students. Before I show you how to do this, I must say there is a little bit of work behind the scenes for this, but if you're willing to put in the work, it'll save you tons of time later in the school year. So here's how I created the student learning profiles. First, I gave students an interest inventory and self-perception surveys for each subject. These digital and paper interest surveys and inventories, they are available in my TPT shop, and I let them know that yes, it seems like a lot, but this is super helpful for me getting to know each one of my students in these subjects. And they provide awesome results. So at the beginning of the year, we take lots of surveys. Now, I did use paper surveys, but I'd recommend using Google surveys. These are included in this TPT resource. And with the paper results, I read them through ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to write it in a paragraph so that I could reference it later throughout the year. And I gave it an example of myself first. Now, if you're using the Google surveys, you can just feed it to the chatbot. I make a code for each one of my students to protect their privacy, like a number, their initials, etc. And then ChatGPT makes its magic happen for each student. I added all of these into one Google Doc, but going forward to this next year, I might do it in a Google Sheet instead. I wanted this to be in one file so that I could go back and make groups based on interests. I would likely do this on a Google Sheet next year just so that I could go back and add notes for each quarter or trimester. So here's the framework for getting student profiles together. Start by telling AI you are an expert data analyst. Then explain. You're going to share the survey results that you have with your students, then share examples of what you are looking for, and then explain why you are doing this. Then ask the chatbot, is there anything else that you need to know from me? If it has questions, go ahead and answer those. Remember, you can use your microphone to speak into it and record your answers that way. Then get specific. Tell it, give me the results for each student in a paragraph form. Make it sound like the student who wrote it and include all the details. Please do not give me an introduction or conclusion. Now, while you're doing this, you only want to do about 5 students at a time. The reason why is because if you do all 25 or 30 of your students, your chances for AI hallucinating increase. So batch it into small amounts at a time. Now that you have your student profiles together, you are ready to move forward, but we're going to add a little bit more to their profiles. Now we need some insight from our partners, the parents. So I'm going to show you how I use ChatGPT to connect with my families. At the start of each year, I like to get insight from my families about their scholar. They know better than anyone else what motivates their child and what they want them to accomplish that year. These are my partners, and I want to make sure that we are both on the same page, and I want to let them know if their expectations are realistic or if it's something that'll happen a few years from now. Hey, we aren't learning about coordinate planes in 3rd grade, my friend. Honestly, they've never had a goal like that, but I'm just saying. The number one question that you need to ask your families at the beginning of the school year is, what do you expect from me as your child's teacher this year? I am always fascinated by the responses. Typically, it has nothing to do with a benchmark and everything to do with being empathetic, patient, and transparent. Once I get the survey results from the parents, I add the student codes in the parent responses. So then that way I know whose goes with who. Then I add the response to the student learning profile. And here's the cool part. So now I can take what parents have said to me and I ask ChatGPT to create a list of things that parents said that they want me to be. And then I say, please do not repeat similar things and keep it one-word adjectives because I want to print this out to remind me what my parents expect for the year. The best part is that you can reference this before conferences and you can share how you've been doing this to gain parent support. Trust me, they feel heard, they feel seen, and they absolutely love it. Not only did I ask this question to my families at the beginning of the school year, but I also asked them before each conference, what would you like to talk about? And please list anything you'd like to know more about. This helps me prepare for the conferences. I also ask them about their child's academic strength and their social strengths, as well as their academic weaknesses and their social weaknesses. This framework is very similar to the same framework that I showed you previously, but now we're just going to add these answers into the student profiles. I start by telling AI that you are an expert data analyst. Then I explain by giving the AI the survey results and maybe an example of how I want the list. Next, I ask AI, is there anything else that you need to know from me? And answer the questions. It might ask you specific questions about how you want the response. You can do that or just save it for the next part, but specific, I want the response to be a bulleted list, and please do not include an introduction or conclusion. You could say a bulleted list, you could also say a paragraph. But again, you only want to batch these by the first 5 students and then every 5 from so on, just to avoid hallucination. Now that you have stellar student learning profiles and insight from your families, it's time to set some goals for your class. I cannot tell you how many times my students found my last nerve. And I'm sure if you've been in the classroom for 5 minutes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes I would go on a rant, not in a random Facebook group like I've seen sometimes, but like in my AI chatbot. It was like a free therapist. I would ask for tips on how to deal with certain situations, but the one that stood out the most was the constant bickering among my students. They were finding faults, like they were looking for slug bugs from a car window. And instead of training them for looking at slug bugs, I wanted to train them on how to find kind words, phrases, and actions so that they could refocus on the positive things and also encourage them to think and act more positively. I asked ChatGPT to give me 5 different SMART goals for this, and I picked the best ones for our class. Here's how you can give your students ownership in setting these SMART goals, and this is by allowing them to complete a SWOT analysis. SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm going to give you a free resource that has the types of questions you can ask students that make sense to them below this video. This puts it in their own words and makes them responsible for the classroom goal. It also makes goal setting more intentional and less fluffy. We had 1 behavioral and 1 academic goal. So here's how you can do this. Share a Google form with your students that asks them to complete a SWOT analysis. When completing the Google form, we use the Google plugin Read and Write for students who need assistance. But fair warning, it's sometimes aggravating and challenging if all the students are using Read and Write plugin at once, because it can get too noisy and it'll pick up what everybody is saying. So if you're using it, just make sure that you limit it to 2 or 3 students completing the survey at a time. Once students have responded, you're going to feed those results to ChatGPT. Then you can ask ChatGPT to help you create one academic and one behavioral goal for each student or for the class. Then you can add these goals to your student learning profiles and boom, baby. Now you have a document rich with student information that goes beyond numbers, and it is your tool to connect with them, and it makes it 10 times more meaningful. This lets you know that you really care. The framework for this is, again, you are an expert data analyst. Then explain. Just share the survey results and maybe an example of how you want the goals. You can also give more information about a SMART goal, which ChatGPT is pretty smart and it knows what a SMART goal is, but ask if there's anything else you need to know from me. Then get specific. You can ask it to give you 5 SMART goals that are academic based and 5 SMART goals that are behavioral based, and ask the students to pick one of each so they have a little bit more ownership and it's more meaningful to them. Having a comprehensive student learning profile has helped me so much this past year. I was able to share this with a new teacher right before I left and with teachers in the next grade level. So this helped them to get to know the students so that they didn't fall into the cracks. I was also able to use these student learning profiles when I attended IEP meetings or 504 meetings and I needed to provide positive feedbacks and goals for my students. I was able to share the strengths and weaknesses without having to wonder if I was, finding the best one. And it was not another thing that I had to do. It was something that was already done. Not to mention, I had a ton of information that I could share with the parents. I had a ton of information that I could share with our special educators and with our administrators. And I could share this information with the parents, and it didn't include the jargon that they didn't understand anyways. I didn't want to spend time in conferences on grades since they can read a report card at home. I wanted to spend it talking about my student as a whole, and having these student profiles allowed me to spend more time on communicating their goals and how we were going about getting there. So let's review. You just learned how to create a bomb student learning profile in a snap. You also learned the most important question that you should ask parents at the beginning of the school year. Finally, we talked about how to use a SWOT analysis to create SMART goals for your class and your students so that you can hold them accountable. Now, I'd love to know, how do you think that student learning profiles could help you in your classroom? Comment one way for your chance to win a grade level bundle of Simply STEAM math or grammar games. These are self-checking games that allow you to play in more than one way. Our winner will be announced tonight at 8 p.m. Well, thanks so much for showing up today, and I hope that this training leaves you feeling inspired to really get to know your scholars and their families. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.